Excellent. So thank you, everyone. And thank you, Janice, for putting these things up. I want to say hello and a warm welcome to everyone joining us for today's PD Zoom session, Warts and All Experiential Learning for Research Managers. My name is Marina Zupan. I'm one of the co-conveners for the South Australia chapter, and I'm a Research Development Officer at Flinders University. I have the pleasure of facilitating today's session, and I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land which we're meeting today. For me and the SA chapter, that is the lands of the Kaurna people, and I acknowledge there will be members joining us today from many different lands across Australia, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So just a reminder that today's session will be recorded for ARMS members to access, and please place any questions you have in the Q&A box, and we will have some time to address those at the end of the speaker presentations. And there'll be also a short survey at the end that we'd really appreciate if you could follow this and complete. So today's session is all about warts and all experiential learning for research managers. And the reason we chose this topic and title is that we are constantly faced with change and challenge, with this current time in SA being no exception. But research managers and administrators are experts in learning by doing and learning from change. So there's an absolute treasure trove in learning opportunities and solidarity to be gained from sharing these experiences. So we have gathered some really amazing speakers for today from across the South Australian universities who will explore each of them, how they have embraced and learnt from change from a project and a team perspective, process improvement perspective, and also from a career perspective. So joining us from University of South Australia, we have Allyson McAllister, Project Lead of Research Degree Admissions, whose career spans various management and analyst roles at UniSA and industry sectors. And for the past few years, she has worked on implementing a project-based research degree at UniSA. From UniSA, we also have Vicky Dudek, who is team leader at Research Degree Admissions at UniSA. And she joined UniSA in 2016 as a research degrees officer. And she previously worked at Middlesex University in London as an accreditation coordinator and assessment manager. From University of Adelaide, we have Dr. Godfrey, Director of Research Development and Pre-Award at the University of Adelaide, who has over 20 years experience spanning scientific research and management, and her leadership has seen management of diverse teams and supported numerous successes in competitive funding at the University of Adelaide. And finally, we have Karen Burke, Research Partnerships Director at Flinders University, who brings to the session rich and diverse experiences across many leadership roles, including as Centre Manager for the ARC Training Centre for Biofilm Research and Innovation, and also will bring experiences from her time as Interim Executive Director of Research Services at University of Adelaide. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our first speakers, Ali and Vicky, who will be co-presenting today about their work introducing a project-based research degree admissions approach at UniSA. So if you would like to share your slides, then I will hand the floor over to you.
Thanks very much, and I will just try and share the right slides in front of lots of people, which is always a pressured environment, so give me 2 secs. All right, does that look okay?
Looks good.
Awesome, great. So hello everyone, I'm Ali McAllister. I'm a project lead at the University of South Australia, as my colleague here mentioned, and also introducing my colleague Vicky Dudek, who's team leader research degree admissions, also at UniSA. So over the last few years, the University of South Australia developed and implemented a project-based research degree admissions model. The change impacted on almost every aspect of research degree admissions. So as you can imagine, introducing something with such a broad impact was never really going to be that simple. Whilst we've definitely realised some of the expected benefits from the model, there's certainly been some challenges along the way. So Vic and I will take you briefly through the background and reasoning behind the change, and have a bit of a brief look at the revised approach, and then talk about the benefits and challenges we faced. All right. So back in 2019, we had a really old in-house application system for research degree admissions, Apply Online, that you can see there. We stored some application data in Research Master 4, which I think is probably about 20 years old. We were assessing applications in in-house built application or in-house built functionality in Research Master 5. We then admitted students using Research Master 4. Ongoing student records were held in Oracle PeopleSoft Campus Solutions. And then we also had paper records and managed students' progress through the process via many filing cabinets and different folders within those filing cabinets. So memories. So our first action was to move from paper records to using Oracle Service Cloud to store applicant information and to better manage our process in an electronic system. Whilst it wasn't a particularly popular change to start off with, what it did mean was that when COVID hit in 2020, we were able to transfer to a working from home environment, which is great. Otherwise, we would have all been having to come into the office during COVID. So tip number one, if you want to implement a somewhat unpopular system, ensure you have a pandemic to make sure that everyone accepts the change. But we also need to do something about the overarching approach. And we'd also been told by our IT team that Research Master would no longer support Research Master 4 or 5 from the end of 2020, which was really concerning. We also had concerns with the reduction in the number of students that could be supported with the available scholarships funds as the RTP allocation approach changed and the standard stipend rate increased. Some colleagues were also concerned that we diverted funding to niche areas and not our institutional areas of strength because of the way we took applications and allocated scholarships to students. So in this environment, we also had a new Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Research commence who introduced a new concept, the project-based research degree, where students would apply directly to a project that already had funding and a supervisory panel. So pass over to my colleague, Vicky.
Thanks, Ali. As Ali has mentioned, the project-based research degree model aims to increase the alignment of students' research with our institutions' overarching areas of research focus and strength. Pictured here is the high-level overview of the process from project inception through the student admissions. The first step in the process is for the potential supervisory panels to submit research project proposals rather than applicants. Once submitted, the project undergo peer review to confirm quality, feasibility, and strategic alignment to the university's overarching research strategy. Additional reviews take place where project owners have requested central funding to fund the candidate scholarship. As you can see here, where central funds aren't required, the project goes through what we call a fast-track process, meaning that the projects are reviewed by the relevant Dean of Research with expertise and approved. Approved projects then are advertised on our website for prospective students to apply to, which result in student selection and admissions. Looking a bit deeper at step one of the process, the research project submission form captures everything required to assess the quality of the project, while also capturing all information needed to advertise the project to potential applicants. Up until recently, this form was housed in Research Master, and now we've recently transitioned to APN. Once reviewed and approved, the information captured in the research proposal makes up the information that is displayed on our research degree website, where students can submit an application to the projects they're interested in. Each individual project is presented on its own webpage, showcasing project information. In most cases, project information goes through our University Communications and Marketing unit for copywriting to make the project information as marketable as possible to domestic and international markets. In the process similar to that of HR recruitment, prospective research students engage with a project-based research degree model by applying to particular projects on our website. Applications come through a cloud-based end-to-end talent acquisition platform known as eRecruit. The submitted applications are directed to a centralized unit responsible for initial vetting. At this stage, the central unit evaluates the quality and the relevance of each application, ensuring that required documentation was submitted and applicants are eligible for projects that they're applying for. For example, if the project is open only for domestic applicants and they're international. Subsequently, once applications have been checked, they're passed on to the respective academic units and supervisory panels for more focused and informed assessment of each candidate's suitability for a specific research project. A project supervisory panel further evaluates the application based on the unique criteria, expertise, and suitability to the project focus. Shortlisted candidates then been interviewed, and recommendation for admissions are made to by academic units back to the central unit. In a case management style approach, the central unit administers the final offers, incorporating offer details into admission data for seamless integration into the university's student record management system, ready for student commencement. And now we'll quickly touch on the gains and pains we have seen from adopting this model. In terms of gains, the PBID model offers a strategic advantage by enhancing the alignment of funds with areas of research strengths. By strategically aligning funds with areas of research strengths, the PBID model optimizes the utilization of resources, maximizes research outcomes, and reinforces the institution's commitment to excellence and innovation. Secondly, by establishing a supervisory panel, it enhances project quality and feasibility, resulting in more robust and impactful research projects. And lastly, it reduces speculative applications, encouraging applicants to focus only on the projects aligning with their interest and the university research areas, streamlining resource utilization and improving application quality. And I will pass it back to Ali.
Thanks, Vicky. So Vicky's told you a little bit about what worked well. So I'll tell you a little bit more about what our warts have been. So firstly, we struggled a lot with changing people's mindset as we went through the implementation process. I think one of the things we came across, and I'm sure everyone experiences this, is we've got universities full of really, really clever people with lots of opinions. So when we introduce a major change, there's lots of people who want to get involved and say what their opinion is, but we're faced with a situation where actually the strategic approach had changed from the Deputy Vice-Chancellor. So it was something we all had to align to. Additionally, we were in a really interesting situation because we were just coming out the other side of the pandemic. So we had probably insufficient resources to deliver the project. Really, we would have liked to have some additional staff to focus on some of the change approaches. And really, because of this, we didn't spend enough time engaging with stakeholders. I've got a really clear memory of someone phoning me up about 2 months before we implemented the new process. We just signed off on the system. Someone said, "Oh, this is never going to happen." So our comms really were not amazing. We did manage to get people on board though, but it took a lot of work, and really we had to really build trust and understanding and spend a lot of time post-implementation going out and spending time with people who are going to use the system and who will be looking to recruit research degree students. So if we did it again, we definitely spend more time communicating exactly what was going on and really getting people to understand what the change was about and how it would impact them. So thinking about the environment we're in as well, the market for research degree students. We were looking to introduce a kind of major change at a time when fewer domestic students were looking to complete a PhD as we came out of the pandemic, and as cost of living increased, which also impacted our overall application numbers and also probably how we represented our project outcomes. Because ideally we would have liked to seen a bigger increase in domestic applications and domestic students commencing. We're also in a situation where RTP funding was declining because of the change in approach the government introduced. So we actually were unable to offer the same volume of scholarships as we might have been able to do in the past. And that particularly impacted our international students who, as some of you would be aware, we can only offer 10% of our RTP income to scholarships to that group. So again, that impacted on how we reflected on the project. So I think the problem kind of came down to how we outlined the potential successes of the project, and maybe some of them weren't as accurate as what we might have liked because of external factors that really were outside of our control. And a change like this, it doesn't take away or negate the fact that a lot of the things that we need to do are just, really hard work and, going out and engaging with industry and really convincing and getting people's buy-in about the benefits of a research degree, why it's really important for your organization to get involved in this. And that stuff's not going to change. That's always going to be challenging. So in retrospect, I think we could have probably better outlined like what is feasible, what is actually going to happen from the introduction of this new approach. So one of our other issues was because we pivoted in the way we talked about research degrees and getting students on board, we found that some researchers were really putting up their dream project for a unicorn student, not a real life person. So we had projects going up that were super specific in a really, really interesting area, but there'd be really few people that would be qualified to do that project, or who might be interested to do that project. So there was a little bit of disappointment that when people went out with their dream project for their dream student, that we couldn't attract an applicant because they just didn't exist, unfortunately. So we would say we had no warty toads here in South Australia. We've got only southern bell frogs with no warts overall. So we did have some challenges, but lots of things to learn from as well. So I think we've got questions at the end. Is that right, Marina?
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Ally and Vicky, for a really interesting talk. Excuse me. Yes, just a reminder that if anyone does have questions, please place them in the Q&A. And if it's for a specific talk, just a reminder to put their name in there as well. We'll have time to answer those at the end of session. But that was a really great talk and definitely raises a good point about managing expectations from the people that you need to work with to successfully implement something. With that, we will move on to our next speaker, Dr. Dale Godfrey. So if you'd like to share your slides, she will be talking to us about her strategy and findings from implementing something which is particularly pertinent with investigator grants closing tomorrow, which is a new internal deadline for major grant rounds at the University of Adelaide. So Dale, if you'd just like to go into full screen, then I give the floor to you. Thank you.
Fantastic. So thanks, Marina. Hopefully that's now full screen. Please let me know if it's not. So good morning, and thanks to ARMS for organising this session. I'm really delighted to be here today and to share the experience that we've had at the University of Adelaide in implementing a mandatory internal deadline for major grant rounds. Today, I'm presenting on behalf of our really dedicated and fantastic pre-award team led by Siobhan Guy. And I'd also like to really acknowledge the support that we've had from our faculty, Deputy Deans Research, our PBCR Research Excellence, and our DVCR in making this possible. But before I get started, I would just like to acknowledge and pay respects to the traditional custodians whose lands we gather on. I'm in Adelaide, so the Kaurna people, and pay respect to their elders past and present. So perhaps it's useful if I just provide a quick slide here about our current research office structure. So we provide research services through a centralised model. And in the last year or so, we've had a restructure within our research services office where we've moved to align our teams to the research funding cycle. So previously, our teams were based on sponsors and schemes where each team supported across the full life cycle from pre-award through to post-award. So with our new structure, I look after our two pre-award teams. So that's our research development team. And that team provides strategic support for priority applicants, targeted schemes, and ultimately that aiming to enhance competitiveness and expand on the scale and diversity of funding. But the work that I'm presenting today is actually from our pre-award team. And this team really specialises in application review and submission to sponsors. And at the University of Adelaide, they're really our experts in grant guidelines, compliance, and eligibility. And one of the challenges that we found our pre-award team having was really related to late submissions. So we were finding that a lot of our submissions were coming in within days of the external deadline, and it really wasn't leaving the team enough time to really provide comprehensive reviews. And this was really obvious with our major funding rounds, so ARC and NHMRC, where we had the largest volumes of applications coming in. And as you can imagine, and maybe you're experiencing this as well, it was significant stress to the pre-award team, not really knowing what was coming, when it was coming, where we were resourced to deal with it when it hit. And of course, that led to risk of non-compliant or non-eligible applications and potential damage to the university's reputation. So there was this real need for change, and we thought with the restructuring of our office, it was an ideal opportunity to rethink how we delivered those pre-award services to the research community. So Working with our faculties and DVCR's office, we came up with a proposal for introducing a 1-week mandatory review. So what we proposed was to continue offering our 3-week full review. So if applicants had their application ready at 3 weeks before the deadline, we'd provide a full comprehensive grants craft review. And then what we did was turn our 1-week compliance review into a mandatory 1-week review. And we started this off for the ARC Discovery Project Expression of Interest round. And the reason that we chose this particular round was twofold. One, because we were anticipating really large numbers of applications, probably bigger than any other round that we have, as well as the fact that it was an expression of interest round. So it was already a reduced application format. It didn't have a budget. And so we thought it might be an easier bar for researchers to meet, where we could sort of meet them halfway in this first instance. So the overall goals were to increase the quality, compliance, eligibility of applications, but also to reduce and manage some of those workload pressures that the pre-award team were experiencing, with the hypothesis that ultimately earlier submission would result in higher quality application and better outcomes for the university. So in terms of our implementation strategy, there was a lot of work done with engagement and communication. So we really worked closely with our academic units, with our Deputy Dean's research, with DVCR's office to ensure that what we were proposing was in line with their expectations and that they would support us with the approach. Communication, wow, we spent so much time, the pre-award team did an amazing job communicating often and through every channel you can possibly imagine to make sure that everybody in the research community was aware of the change that was coming and understood what it meant. And when I say understood what it meant, I meant we were telling people, if your application's not submitted by this 1-week mandatory deadline, it will not be submitted to the sponsor. We also had to think about operational adjustments for the pre-award team. So all of a sudden now we were going to be receiving the bulk of our applications at that 1-week deadline. So we needed to think about workload as well and the types of reviews that we could provide at that time. So in terms of outcomes, I think it's fair to say we were all a little terrified with how this would go. We did our best. We had the comms out there. We had our DDRs sharing the message. But my personal real concern was that what if only 50% of people make the deadline? Are we really going to enforce this hard deadline? And if we don't enforce it, we've missed our one opportunity, because we can never come back and try again, because people wouldn't believe us that we were going to hold them to it. That said, we were really pleasantly surprised when 98% of the applications were submitted by the mandatory deadline. So it was a huge relief for us all. We did have one submission that came in late and was not supported, and their application didn't go to the ARC. We also had one submission that we were expecting that didn't make the deadline. It was deemed a competitive application, and on this occasion, working with the Deputy Dean research, we provided an exception, a 24-hour extension, which they met. So following the DP round, we've now rolled this out for NHMRC ideas and just recently now for the investigator grant rounds, and had similar compliance to the deadlines. We were quite surprised at some of the feedback we've received, which is that researchers did actually really appreciate having that 1 week to polish their applications instead of actually writing the applications, which sometimes was the case. And they also valued the opportunity to deal with any of those compliance, eligibility matters a week out rather than on the day of submission or the day before submission. Of course, there's been challenges and risks along the way. One of those contentious points is around the fact, and I'm sure you'll have them at your universities as well, where you've got top performing researchers who can submit on the day, hours before the deadline, and still be successful. And it's no different at Adelaide. So we managed this through some very careful, considerated one-on-one discussions. The reminders and the communication took a lot of effort, and I think to the point where, you know, we were worried that we were annoying people by constantly communicating with them about the new process. And of course, there was that risk of relationship damage where we didn't want to upset our researchers such that they didn't want to help out with info sessions and peer review, the types of things that we rely on them for. And luckily enough, that hasn't been the case. Of course, there was also going to be some disruption and adaptation to the workload and when the applications were coming in, and the moving of that pressure point from 2 days before to a week before. And of course, a period of adjustment for the research community as well. And it takes time for the community to fully understand. If someone's not submitting a discovery project, they're probably not going to be thinking about this until they go to submit their ideas grant. In terms of workflow, we did need to rely on our research development team to assist with the large volume of applications that came in on that week deadline for the discovery projects. So in terms of outcomes and long-term vision, I guess one of the things that we weren't really expecting was this great opportunity that this has provided for our schools and faculty leaders to really understand the quality and timing of some of the submissions that we're receiving. I think it was a real eye-opener for them to see how many applications were coming in so late and the poor quality of some of those applications. And I think through this relationship and collaborative approach, we've really built how we work together, and it's fair to say that we really couldn't have achieved this new process without the support of schools and faculties. I think, over time, we hope that the research community will become more aware of our 1 week mandatory deadline, and we won't need to go out so heavily and so hard with every round to remind people that it's coming, that it will just start to be part of the new process. And we really hope over time that it will increase the competitiveness of our applications. So in terms of lessons learned, I think, reflecting on some of the challenges and successes has really emphasised the need to be flexible and adaptable in research management. And some of the key takeaways for us have been really around the need for strong leadership support and building those relationships. We couldn't have done this without the communication and consultation. If otherwise, people just wouldn't have met our deadline. And it was a little bit painful, but we got there. And of course, also recognising that balance between process enforcement and exceptions. So that one discovery project that I mentioned that we gave the 24-hour exception to, that one was invited to full application. So important that sometimes there can be exceptions to the rule. So moving forward, we'll go through a period of continuous improvement, refinement. Obviously, you need to track applications to see what the impact is on our success rates. But for me personally, I'm really hoping that there'll be this cultural shift where we transform the research office from being perceived as a gatekeeper to submission to being a more valued contributor to research success. And through this, we're hoping it will become a bit self-sustaining, whereby the more and higher level review that researchers are receiving from us, the more that they'll seek out our reviews, get their applications in earlier so that we can help them strengthen and increase their success rate such that we wouldn't necessarily need a mandatory deadline because most people are actively seeking our review and feedback. So just in conclusion, we were pleasantly surprised at the positive outcomes, and if you're in a similar situation and considering going forward with something like this, I really encourage you to do it. But make sure you've got that support of your leadership, and we're really open to feedback. So feel free to reach out to myself or Siobhan. I'm really happy to share our experience. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful talk. Thank you, Dale. I think there's definitely a lot to be taken away from that in terms of needing to be flexible and follow the needs of different stakeholders. And I'm sure a lot of people would be having a lot of these considerations now for the next major grant rounds. So last but not least, I'd like to invite our speaker, Karen Burke, who will offer us a bit of a different perspective now on experiential learning from the learnings of her own career, from responding to organisational change to system implementation and developing skills to navigate complex scenarios in research management. So Karen, if you would like to share your slides. Wonderful. All
Thanks,
yours.
Marina. You can all see my screen, I'm hoping. So thanks very much, ARMS, the SA chapter, for organising this PD session today. It's really great to hear about the experiences that some of my colleagues from UniSA and the University of Adelaide have had in experiential learning and through their specific examples. But I guess today, as Marina said, I'm sharing with you a sort of a different take on experiential learning, drawing from some of my personal experiences during my time as Executive Director Interim of Research Services at Adelaide Uni, where I was navigating some complex challenges through a major organisational change. And my second example is from my experience dealing with managing complex systems and processes while I was working as a business lead on a research IT project, and then talking about more recent experiences as a centre manager in a new ARC training centre during the establishment phase, and then some generalisations about those learnings. So I will get started. That's the summary. So really, I just wanted to talk about what experiential learning is. It's the hands-on approach. We all know in our day-to-day jobs, we're learning by doing, we're learning by creating new processes and new policies, doing things different ways all the time. It's about experience and then reflecting on those experiences, adjusting to the real world situations that we find ourselves in. Complements, of course, our theoretical learning. And why is it important in research management? Well, we've learned that, in our careers, we're building our practical skills and knowledge. It's supporting our problem-solving approaches that we need to have when we're addressing the challenges in our day-to-day work, and it's also helping us with our personal and professional development. So my first example is from a couple of years ago while I was at the University of Adelaide, and I guess it's a fairly big example. Major organisational change is never an easy thing. And as the interim director of a large service unit at the university at that time, it was a significant challenge to navigate such a major change, where we were talking about changing research services and the model of service delivery from a centralised model into a hub and spoke model. And so there were a lot of technical challenges to be navigated through that. There were a lot of challenges in terms of managing expectations and HR challenges, to be frank, and the complexities of managing a large team and budget responsibilities to try and assist the university to move to a more sustainable organisational model. And I guess throughout that process, which was long and quite arduous and quite, destabilising both for research services as a unit, but also individuals, major change is always very worrying and threatening. So I think the key things that I learnt through that were a real necessity of being able to adapt communication styles and change my leadership style. The criticality of being able to communicate well and often to people who are being affected by change and who are often feeling quite powerless in the change process, and trying to, of course, maintain the effective use of resources, maintain team morale so that you can keep delivering the services that you need to keep providing to the research community. And so I guess the key learnings there is that organisational change is never easy. It's probably one of the most significant challenges that you can have to adapt to as an organisation and personally, and as a service unit. So it's really important to keep communication and open lines of communication open, to share information, to try and be transparent in communication and in the information provided about the change, and thinking creatively, drawing down on team knowledge and resources to try and find creative solutions for the challenges that you face in a major organisational change. And yeah, I think it really is a learning opportunity in terms of understanding personal resilience, also the resilience of a bigger unit to keep going in the face of very challenging circumstances, the importance of adaptability, and the importance of maintaining relationships and team morale to support you through those very significant changes. So that is my first example. Secondly, I'm going to just quickly talk about a project that I was involved in quite a few years ago now, which was very interesting and very challenging on a number of levels. We've heard from our colleagues at the UniSA about implementing new system changes, and I guess everyone can sort of relate to how difficult that can be. I had the opportunity to be seconded over onto a major systems project, an upgrade at the University of Adelaide in 2016-17 to implement some new, an upgrade to our research management system, Research Master, and including some automated workflow and online forms. Never having really been involved closely with IT projects and, hardcore project management before, I'd have to say it was a real experience in terms of coming to terms with the processes of agile project management. So, it's another world once you get into IT project management. The jargon alone can take significant time to come to terms with scrums and stand-ups and burn downs, and the list goes on and on and on. So that was a significant challenge for me personally. But again, the issues of stakeholder engagement and managing change across a very large institution just highlighted the critical nature of the communication and having a really deep understanding of the effects of the change on the organisation, particularly the push and pull of IT projects where IT developers are very keen to develop a solution and get it out there, and sometimes the aspects of testing or having bugs that are going to really affect people's workday are going to be really critical. So I think, being the middleman as a business lead, understanding the research management business and trying to match that with the requirements and constraints of the system implementation was a really deep learning opportunity. And definitely I got a lot of experience in understanding the technical nature of a research management system, but also the human aspects of managing large-scale projects with IT specialists, as well as the end users of the change. And so I guess, personally, it's really great to be able to understand that side of the business and that world, and to really get some insight into the intersection of technology and research management. And again, I think it really just draws back to being flexible, being able to find creative solutions that can support major change in IT systems and in research management that are going to actually improve the experience and the other aspects of research management in a large organisation. My third example is a more recent one and quite a different one. As Marina said, I've had quite a diverse research management career. I've worked mostly in competitive grant, in the competitive grant space for over 20 years. But recently I took a different challenge and went to be the establishing centre manager for a new ARC training centre that was established at Flinders University in 2023. And in this role, I really had a lot of new experiences in being able to set up and work with a number of different international partners and domestic partners, and to manage a large multi-institutional collaborative effort, while trying to ensure that we were securing the funding and aligning the goals of diverse stakeholders that hadn't really been engaged with for a period of time since the application had been submitted. And I think during that time, you know, the end goal is to secure signatures on an agreement, but really it was a much deeper learning for me in terms of managing those partnerships and really setting up the collaboration for future success. And it was about really drawing down on the goodwill in the collaboration, expanding my negotiation skills, really being able to think strategically, solve problems on a daily basis, and really set the centre up for success by establishing those long-term partnerships that are going to see the centre through at least the next 5 years. So key learnings from that experience are the value in building those strong relationships. Those relationships are not just financial relationships. It's about building a community and building long-term goodwill that's going to support HDR students through the completion of their degrees and into the workforce, hopefully. So yeah, really having a very very detailed understanding of the value of building and managing those strategic partnerships. So I guess next I really just wanted to say the key learnings that I've had out of those 3 experiences. So from the major organisational change, I do like to try and concentrate on the positives, but facing challenges together can really strengthen team dynamics, and the shared experience, if done well, can really build trust and camaraderie. Communication, as I said, is the key, and really being able to demonstrate resilience and model resilience in the face of change is really important. In research systems, resistance to change can mean that you've actually got to fix something. So it's always important to understand the meaning of that resistance, and working through the challenges really does support continuous improvement, and robust systems really make everyone's experience better and support higher standards and better outcomes for future projects. But again, patience, communication, flexibility, and really attention to detail are really important key things that I pulled out of that project. And, you know, from the centre establishment process, it was about, you know, understanding how challenges now will inform future decisions and putting in place strategies and approaches that would foster the long-term trust and partnership. So how do I approach new challenges? I think this is general advice, but it's also, you know, something I try to bring to every time, you know, I've got to do something new that I haven't really done before. And I think it's, you know, it's some common sense approach to breaking down the challenge and seeing, doing a bit of initial planning about what the immediate priorities and timelines are, who the stakeholders are, what the goals are, any resources and constraints. Really leveraging your past experiences, it might be that you haven't got something directly relevant, but there are always components of your past experience that you can bring to your new challenge. And really, I think this is a great strength of our research management community. We have a number of experts around us, people who've done most things before. So seek advice, ask your colleagues or mentors for guidance, or others who've had more experience, and start with what you know and go from there. So apply any existing frameworks and tools you have, except that your initial response might not be perfect, but it's something that you'll have to work from, and keeping the end goal in mind, and really just to start on making that improvement or getting started with that project. And I think we've heard it from the other two unis that, document, review and refine your approach as you go. So why is it important? I think personally and, for your work unit and for your professional career, you're developing practical skills. It's the way that we adapt to dynamic environments. Research management never stands still. There's always a policy change, a university strategy, government strategy. There's always change. So navigating the change and being able to solve problems and respond is critical. It's about building effective strategies, building your leadership and communication skills, fostering collaboration and relationship building. As we've heard, it's continuous learning opportunity and a way to improve our profession and our personal practice. And it's about strengthening resilience. So I think, if there's two things that I take to every challenge, it's looking at how I can apply problem-solving skills to prepare for future challenges, and just trying to be resilient, and not just personally, but ensuring that I'm building my team up and working with them to make sure that we're all holding each other up. So key takeaways, challenges, the learning opportunities, adaptability and resilience are the important things, and the relationships that you build through experiential learning are the things, they're the tools that are going to help you through the future challenges. And that is all, Marina.
Thank you, Karen. That was a lovely talk. I really like the takeaways for personal growth and team bonding from navigating change in different roles, and especially as an early career research manager, I really like what you said about accepting imperfection and seeking advice. So with that, I think we'll move on to some questions. So we're actually going to start with a couple from the Q&A. We have one for Vicky and Ali. Have you transitioned to 100% project-based recruitment and only take application into these projects, or are you also accepting general applications for PhD? And they have a second question, but we'll get to that after the first one.
I'll be happy to answer that. I think the second question will be aligned with the first one. So yes, the only way the applicant can start and apply to PhD or Master of Research is by submitting application to either an existing project, or we also have another option for applicants that have a brilliant idea and would like to develop the research proposal and a project. In this case, they would have to get in touch with a supervisor with expertise in that particular research field and develop the project, and then the supervisor will submit the project for approval. We will do the same process with listing. The only difference will be that the project won't be available on our website. It will be a private project, so the only applicant that was assisting the supervisor in project development will be able to submit an application and apply. And I think the second question was to do with the
impacting processing times of applications.
Processing time. Well, The closing date for each project is individual, and we allow applicants 5 working days to get their references, and then it takes us about another week to assess all of the applications. We can start assessing them as they come, vetting them whether they eligible, whether they have, whether they've applied to a relevant research area. So I would say 2 weeks, and I would say that actually is a lot better than what we used to have, and a quicker turnaround as well.
I see. Thank you. One more question actually for you, Vicky and Ali. What did you personally take away from the process, and has this experience of implementing this change helped you in other areas?
I think you're leaving that one for me, Vicky. I would say it can sometimes, like for me, it sometimes feels like as a professional staff member working with a lot of researchers from across the university, sometimes feels like we're trying to come at things from different angles. But I think realistically, like we're all trying to get to the same outcome. And if we work together and we try and understand what each other's needs are, we get a much better outcome. So I think that's probably what I've taken away, like just really about syncing up needs and understanding and forming a really good working relationship where we've both got the same goals in mind.
Thank you, Ali. So we've got a couple questions for Dale now. Firstly, did you do a risk assessment in advance? And if so, what process did you use? And how did you keep your DVCR informed along the way to any of the implications?
Yeah, I would say we'd been talking about this idea for many, many years, so it wasn't a new idea for the university. So I would say we undertook a risk assessment just using a standard risk assessment matrix. I think for us the risk was minimal because the worst case scenario, people didn't submit and we just pulled back and we still submitted their applications. I think the bigger risk was if we didn't do something, we would just get into this cycle where people were submitting later and later. They weren't getting full reviews from us, so they couldn't see any value. And we were just sort of in this negative spiral where we were heading in the wrong direction. So I think the greater risk was not doing something rather than actually trying to do something. Yes, we kept in communication with our DVCR, and our PVCR research excellence also played a key role in this, as did our faculty leads.
So a related question, prior to implementing this, how many applications did you have in the last day or two before the due date coming in?
Yeah, so that's a really hard question to answer. I don't have the numbers in front of me, and obviously it varied from scheme to scheme, and some cohorts of researchers with some schemes were better behaved than others. But I can say, at least for some schemes, there was a significant number of applications coming in at that late stage. Yeah.
Definitely a challenge when there's a different round, such as with the changes to the ARC in the most recent round. Another question is, when tracking the difference in successful outcomes following implementation of your new review deadline, how can you account for other factors that might contribute to success in schemes, such as new researchers joining the uni or researcher development growth over time?
Yeah, that's a really excellent point, and I don't know that we can. And there's so much going on across the sector and at Adelaide University. We've, as Karen talked about, we've moved in the last few years to a hub and spoke model. So our research development support has been centralised. We have new programs that are being rolled out. We're also working much more closely with our schools and faculties, and looking at sometimes at not always encouraging everyone to submit. And then we've got this little thing called a merger happening at the same time as well. So I don't think we'll really be able to tease apart the impact of this. But at the same time, I think as long as we're working towards increasing our success rates, I'd be happy to see that this plays a part in that.
Yeah. And maybe one last question for you, which is, how quickly did your team complete have and provide feedback for researchers?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. And I think it has varied. And the way we have tended to do it when we were rolling this out was to sort of say, right, what's our time frame? We want to get back to everybody within 24, 48 hours. 48 hours probably more realistic. How many reviews have we got? How many reviewers do we have? And do a sort of rough calculation. I think I don't want to give a set time because it wasn't always consistent. It depended on, how many investigators, how many partners were on the grant, what did compliance look like, the experience of the reviewer at the time. But, it could be anything depending on, whether it was just a pure compliance check of maybe half an hour through to longer than that, depending on how complex the application was and when in the timing it came in and whether it had been looked at earlier or supported by our development team or not.
Yeah, thanks, Dale. That's a really good point, and it raises the fact that there's just so many factors at play, and that's why it's such an important role for research managers to be adaptable. So on that note, I want to ask Karen a question. So Karen, you mentioned the importance of adaptability, and I wanted to ask what does this look like to you, and how do you apply that, especially in leadership?
So yeah, it's a great question. And I think, it's important to have a plan when you're getting started on addressing a challenge, of course, but always important to be able to not be wed to your plan if it's not heading in the right direction, to be able to really listen to feedback and be able to make an assessment about whether it is valid and whether you've got to make adjustments to the plan. So I think, being adaptable and flexible in that way, it reinforces the good relationships with the stakeholders that you're setting up, but also it enables a better outcome in the end. If you're implementing something that is actually achievable, and you can always re-examine it in the second iteration and just see what needs to be adapted then. So I think it is really just about listening and communicating and being able to make those adjustments as you go, not waiting and sticking to your guns regardless. So
yeah. Thank you, Karen. One more question for you from the chat, which is, how important was project management skills for you in all of these scenarios?
So critically important again, particularly, so I guess the first one, the IT project, chronologically anyway, it really threw me into a world of project management that I didn't know existed. I was upskilled with some agile project management training, which helped an enormous amount, and I think as with any methodology, there are always tools that you can take from those frameworks. So, I think that really helped me with having a more informed view about project planning, Gantt charts, other tools like that. So, so it was important in the IT project. For the major organisational change, I think the project management skills are critical. Again, there was a whole project, it's a major project, right, for an organisation. So there's a whole project management office set up with project managers to manage your components of the change. So you get drawn into the project management world that way. And in my most recent example, in the centre establishment, the whole establishment process was much more in my control, and I did use a number of project management skills and tools to manage a whole range of processes. So from using collaborative project management tools, things like Trello, SharePoint, there's a whole range of technological solutions as well as other more traditional approaches. So really important to just keep things on track, to remind yourself where you're up to, what the end goal is, and I think it's critical in any major project or change that you're introducing.
Thank you, Karen. And I think we could do a completely other PD at Zoom about technological solutions and resources. So that is actually all we have time for today. I would like to extend a huge thank you to all of our speakers, Ali, Vicky, Dale, and Karen, for offering your time to us today and all of these extremely valuable insights and your experiences. I've personally found your words really inspiring, and I'm sure there have been a lot of learnings and relatability from everyone watching today. And with that, thank you everyone who has joined today's PD at Zoom session. I think ARMS will be putting up there it is. And if you can fill out the survey that hopefully ARMS will share as well. And we really look forward to seeing you at future ARMS events.